Seth Wickersham, senior writer for ESPN, New York Times bestselling author, joining us now on the Volkswagen Dealers Expert Hotline. Seth, good to talk to you again. How are you?
Gentlemen, how's everyone doing?
We're doing great. I just want to start us off. I think most of us got a chance to read it, but for those who have not, the first thing that jumps out when you're reading this is that when the job interviews and search was going on in Atlanta, the people in Atlanta were asked to make a list of their top three candidates, and Bill Belichick did not make anyone's top three. So as a way to maybe encapsulate what the rest of the story is about, how did that happen? How did Belichick not make anyone in the Falcons organization? He was not one of their top choices when all was said and done.
It's amazing, isn't it? I think that every time I think I'm done with writing about Belichick and Kraft and everything, there's always something new that happens. And what transpired in January is baffling to think of. How does this guy with 8 Super Bowl rings get shut out? How did he only get one interview? And so we, decided to look into it and pursued it as best we can. And that was one of the more fascinating revelations. And that's that, we all remember on January 25th, Belichick had a meeting with Arthur Blank. It lasted 4.5 hours. It was a good meeting. It was Belichick's first interview to be a head coach, his official interview since 1998, which is kind of crazy. I mean, that's got to be some sort of record for time between official job interviews. And Blank brought him back for a second interview. That interview didn't go as well. The Falcons told us, people that were involved in the meeting told us that, it was done out of respect for Bill, and which tells you that he wasn't really being considered for the job at that point. And when they took a poll, he didn't finish in anyone's top three, anyone's. And we wanted to try to find out what happened between that first meeting where he appeared to be the front runner and the second meeting where they met with him largely out of respect, not out of serious consideration.
Seth, obviously one of the biggest headlines around here that comes out of that story yesterday is this idea that Robert Kraft told Arthur Blank that you can't trust Bill, and basically, helped to submarine his chances of getting a job down there. If indeed that happened, as the sources lay out, you've covered the inside workings of this Patriots organization for a long time, very famously. Would that surprise you, and would that seem to be out of character for Robert Kraft?
No, I mean, as a matter of fact, we've been in contact with the Patriots about that specific piece of reporting, and Stacey James himself said it wouldn't surprise him to know that owners sometimes lament to those who are close to them. It's been no secret, and I don't think it's a secret to any of your listeners, that the relationship between Belichick and Robert Kraft, has not been warm and fuzzy for a long time. And it doesn't mean it was dysfunctional. It just means that, those were two people who had a phenomenally good working relationship that it became strained. And I think that I had this anecdote in my book. Owners have known this for a long time. I mean, I had this anecdote in my book, and I believe it's from 2008. So it was right after Spygate and the 18-1 season. Kraft was at an owners meeting, and an executive turns to him and he says, what's it going to take for you to fire that a-hole, referring to Belichick? And Kraft replied, 8-8. And that was back then. And, since then, obviously they've had a ton of success. They've had some falling outs in terms of relationships. We all saw the things that Kraft looked into the camera and said on the dynasty. And so Arthur Blank is one of Kraft's best friends. And, we reported, and multiple sources have said that Kraft warned Blank about Belichick's trustworthiness. Kraft, through the Patriots, pushed back on that and denied that he did that. But I think that, to me, it was more just reflective of the state of their relationship and the state of where things are with them, rather than maybe a pivotal thing that mattered. Each owner is a boss in their own right. They don't like to be told what to do. But again, how is it that a guy with 8 Super Bowl rings gets shut out this hiring cycle? And I think that all these little things contributed to it.
That's my one question, Seth. Do you think Bill will work again as a head coach in the NFL?
Man, I wish I had a great answer for that. I don't know. Belichick himself has told confidants he thinks he'll get at least one interview next year, which is, again, it's just kind of it warps your mind to think about, like, how is that the case? How is that the expectation that the greatest head coach in the history of the game, at least in modern times, might get one job interview? And I think that there's a chance that he gets shut out again. I also think there's a chance that he serves as like an accelerator, and that teams fire their head coaches in December to get first dibs at him, so that there's not like a bidding war for him. But it was a poor reflection of owners, I think, and the state of the Patriot way and the perception of Belichick as an operator of football decisions, that he got shut out, and that he essentially got a cursory look.
How much does the age enter into it, though?
Yeah.
Because when you hire a head coach, obviously you're not hoping that you're going to have to hire another head coach in 2 or 3 years. When you hire a guy who's already into his 70s, you have to think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it matters. I think that if he had been 62 rather than 71 at the time when he interviewed with the Falcons, I think that would have made a difference. I think that when you look at we have some reporting from the Eagles, that the Eagles, Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman have known Bill Belichick for a long time. He's someone that they have a huge amount of respect for. The Eagles obviously didn't finish the season the way they wanted to, and I think that even though they were behind Nick Sirianni, they felt like they had to at least discuss the idea of what this guy's available, what could he possibly bring to the team? And I think that one of the things was that, like, when you hire Bill, even though he's approaching these interviews saying, like, hey, look, I don't need total control of football operations. I just want to coach. I'm willing to work with existing staff. I think they feel like that even though he's saying that, when you hire someone like Bill and his presence, you have to turn the keys over to him. And there's a perception out there that he's only going to coach until he passes Don Shula. I don't know if that's fair or not, but that's the perception. And I think the teams are like, hey, look, do we blow up the building, do things as he wants done for 2 years, and then what? We're looking for another coach. I think the Eagles at least felt like he doesn't have the greatest track record of developing coaches who, are able to be successful on their own running teams. And so there's no question that I think age was a factor.
Seth Wickersham is with us here. The story dropped yesterday about Bill Belichick not getting the job in Atlanta, not getting much else. There's a graph in the story, Seth, where you wrote, asked whether Kraft had any motivations to keep Belichick off the sideline. A source close to the coach said, quote, if Bill goes on to have success and Tom already had success, then who does Kraft have to blame? How likely do you think it is? Because again, this is a source close to Bill telling you this.
Yes.
Right. How likely do you think that's an actual thing? Like, that was part of the calculus and is an ongoing part of the thought process of Robert Kraft saying, like, I can't have him out there coaching and winning, because if he does, I'm going to look like the one who ruined this thing.
I think it's indicative of how bad things are now. That's what I think it is. I think that Kraft, there was a source in the story who, was very close to Kraft and is very close to Kraft, and essentially says, like, they're not doing anything to help Bill, but they weren't going to hurt him either. I think that's a little bit more accurate. Like, I think that, like, if Belichick had ended up with a job this hiring cycle, I don't think that Kraft would be moved either way by it. I think that, like, that quote, from someone who's incredibly well versed in the Patriot way, I think that it's indicative of just how toxic things are and how bad things got at the end. And, I reported it in January, right after Belichick and the Patriots went separate ways, and we kind of repeated it in this story. But I think that most people thought that Bill was done this past season after they lost the game. I think it was in Germany to the Colts.
Yes.
They had a horrifically poor offensive performance, and he benched Mac Jones for the just for a 2-minute drill. And I think that that the Krafts had made up their mind, and that might have been true. I don't know. I know that the Krafts, when you lose a game or you get on a losing streak, there's no question that they can utter things that, out of emotion sometimes. But I think that Belichick wanted to keep coaching in New England and believed that he had a chance to fix things there until mid-December, when I think he finally realized that, his time there was going to come to an end. And so, that quote and whether Kraft wants him to coach again and how blunt he was in conversations, the 2 conversations that he had with Arthur Blank during the interview cycle, the conversation that he had with Josh Harris down in Washington. I think no matter what, people know that this is reflective of just how poor the terms are with these 2 men who accomplished, unbelievable things together.
How much is this common sense from the or human nature of a relationship where you mentioned for 20 years they were at the top, and then for the last 4 years it's just kind of not gone that way. When it comes to the word trust, how do you look at that word when it comes to Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft? Because let's face it, you trusted Bill to do what's best for the franchise for so many years because it went so well. And when it's not going well, and when we saw in Germany that game where it's just really tough to watch, how much do you think that of it is Robert saying, hey, someone calling him as a fellow owner saying, what do you think?
Yeah.
Well, based on the last 4 years, I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know if you can give the keys to the franchise to this guy, because I don't know what will happen to you guys.
Yeah, and trust is a durable word in that regard, right? It has nothing. It is, in addition to interactions and whether they believe that the interactions they're having are trustworthy. It's like, does this guy still have his fastball? And Kraft is a respected owner around the NFL. I mean, all the owners they're all kind of frenemies, and some of them are close with others, and but Robert Kraft is a respected owner, and he's done a lot for the league. And even though he's appeared to his colleagues as pious at times and arrogant, I think that people respect him. And when he moves on from a coach who's impacted his life and legacy that much, I think that has an impact. And so even when he talks to Arthur Blank and gives him his scouting report and his referral of the type of coach Bill Belichick is at age 71, 72. We saw what happened in the NFL this year. I mean, we detail a lot with the Falcons in his interview with them because that's the only one that happened. It's just astounding that some of these other teams, Washington, didn't even really look at him as an option. And, that to me is reflective of ownership and the way that things are trending in the league as much as it is about Bill Belichick.
Final question for you, Seth. You read at the end of this story that about Bill's book on leadership and whether or not he give away any secrets. A confidant said, well, Belichick is going to write a lot but not disclose much. The book will be theories and tenets, guardrails, and bullet points. So I ask you, Seth Wickersham, as a New York Times bestselling author, does that sound like a good book? Something that has a lot of words but doesn't say much and is mostly bullet points?
I mean, I think, look, I would love for a tell-all memoir just like everybody else, but any window into his brain is fascinating. And he's a unique character, both in the culture and in football circles, and anything will be fascinating. But I think we've seen it. What I was getting at with that point is we've seen what happens when his charges go off and try to run a version of his system elsewhere. It doesn't work. It's because there's no book that can tell you with 30 seconds left in the Super Bowl and the Seattle Seahawks at the 1 yard line to not call timeout. because he sees dysfunction on the other side, and then to send in a undrafted cornerback who had just gotten beat on a big play and make sure he knows how to make the pivotal play of the game at that point. There's nothing that can replicate that. And it was more of a statement of this guy's singular genius than it was, whatever he may or may not say in a book. But no matter what he says, it's going to be interesting. And I think people are going to want to read it. You saw what he said on Pat McAfee's show yesterday. He's going to help ESPN do some draft commentary. And, a lot of what he said was kind of boilerplate. It wasn't super fascinating, but just coming from his mouth and the glimpses of the staggering knowledge and depth and work and ethic that he's put into accumulating this database of, football acumen is just fascinating. And I think that if that comes through in a book, I think people are going to want to read it.
Okay. All right. Hey, Seth, thanks so much for the time. More good reading from Seth Wickersham, along with Don Van Natta Jr. and Jeremy Fowler. It was published yesterday on ESPN, but you can read it right now. Seth, thanks for the time. Appreciate it.
Hey, have a great day, you guys.
All right. Thank you very much. There he goes. If you like that clip, check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Red Sox analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.